Ladies and gentlemen, the following is scheduled for one fall. It is time for That Way Cool Wrestling Show! Good morning, everybody. Danny J here, along with LeGrand Jackson. What's up? Charles Gregory and Mark Lindsay are on assignment today. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right down below. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel. We got plenty of stuff on this channel, including That Way Cool Wrestling Show.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of great stuff coming up and a lot of great interviews coming up as well. So you're not going to want to miss it. Hit the subscribe button, but also hit that little notification bell as well. Make sure you're notified when these new videos pop up, and we'll go from there.
Yep.
Having a good day?
I'm having a fantastic
day.
Why don't you lie to the people and tell them they're on assignment? You know the hot light came on at Krispy Kreme, and they're over there eating themselves into a coma.
Gorging themselves. You can see all the room we have in the studio right now, which is real nice. What I was going to... Poor guys are going to beat my ass back up it. So what happens is, today we have an awesome guest on today. As you know, season 4, we've been getting a lot of different guests from yesteryear and today. Today is no different. We have NWA, WWF, WCW star Tommy Angel on the show today. Tommy, welcome to That Way Cool Wrestling Show.
Good morning, brothers. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for being here, man.
Now, for those of you who are old school wrestling fans like us, you'll definitely know who Tommy is.
Yep.
Tommy was featured weekly on WCW Saturday Night.
Yep.
WCW Worldwide.
Yep.
As well as we used to see him on WWF Superstars from time to time as well. Saturday morning was the time to watch wrestling back then, and we got to see stars like Tommy and other stars like him who brought us up into wrestling and got us to make us see what wrestling was, and as kids back then
helped us become fans.
There you go. And then eventually we get into it like dumbasses, and then we moved from there. But Tommy, once again, welcome on the show. You're calling us out of South Carolina. How is the weather down there, by the way?
It is fantastic. It's a nice, cool morning, probably about 70 degrees, sunshine.
That's nice. And we have it up here, too. It's been nice. So we're hoping the hurricanes stay away. We had tornado warnings just the other night. So I'm just hoping everything stays fine and good as it is. Let me see. Why am I getting notifications of things? Okay, very good. So what we're going to do is talk about old school wrestling. What were the dates of when you were highly active?
I was from 1986 to 1994 was my run.
There you go. 86. What I say is if wrestling was a fine wine, 86 was the year.
Absolutely,
that you went for.
Man.
I mean, for me, it was. I mean, I started watching NWA in 85.
Okay.
Probably started watching wrestling more in 83 for myself. But there was a lot of different things that came on back then. With you and other guys like you, like Rocky King and George South and all these other greats from those territories. Tell us basically, just bring us into your world back then. You're breaking in, what was it like with these promoters and jumping from one promoter to the other and stuff like that? Walk us through the turmoil, as you should say.
Sure. Quick backstory. I was in the military in Fort Bragg, North Carolina from 81 to 85. Right out of high school, I went in to join the 82nd Airborne Division, and then on the weekends, we'd watch world-class wrestling, and I thought, man, Kerry Von Erich, he was buff and good-looking dude. I was like, man, I bet he's got money and chicks, and that's what I want to do when I grow up.
Right.
So I trained with a bunch of guys, powerlifters and bodybuilders, and I got my weight up to about 260. And at the end of my 4 years, I had a decision to make: get out of the military and pursue wrestling, or stay in. I want to be a helicopter pilot, and as you know, I chose to get out. So I stayed in Fayetteville, North Carolina area, just training in the gym and trying to figure out how we get into business. And we used to go down to the Cumberland County Arena where the NWA would come, and we'd go hang out and try to talk to people. And Gene Ligon was out back after his match, and like, hey, dude, how do we get into business? He goes, well, Jim Crockett Promotions is out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and he kind of teed it up. So we just kept calling and bugging him, and as would have it, Crockett Promotions put together Dusty Rhodes. I wanted to create a new group of enhancement talents, what they called it.
Right.
Their TV ratings weren't doing that well. They wanted to train guys to have competitive matches, so people wouldn't. As soon as you saw a job guy on TV, they're going to get squashed. Beat them up in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So Gene Anderson and Nelson Royal were subcontracted by Crockett Promotions to train the first class of enhancement talent. And we found out about the tryout in Mooresville, North Carolina. Went there. It was an all-day affair. He paid $200, non-refundable. But Nelson Royal, back then was called the Ranch. He had an arena, had a barn. He had horses and cattle. And you're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, like running around a field, went down the hill with a guy on your back. Italian Stallion was the guy there helping as far as that. And then after they wore us out all day doing all these drills and stuff, we had to get in the ring, and Stallion was shooting on all of us to see what we knew and kind of attitude we had. And he was I was just strong as an ox, and he kept trying to pin me, and I just kept flipping him off, and he's getting pissed off. But I remember at the end of it, they told, I think there were 15 of us, and like 8 of us were chosen. He said, congratulations, we start our camp on this date. It's 4 months long, and if you pass, you'll be on television.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, man, this is cool. And so every Friday afternoon, me and this guy from Fayetteville would drive up to Mooresville. We'd spend the night, and we'd work out Friday night, Saturday, and go back. And for 4 months, we did that. And I remember they said, all right, here's your first TV dates. We drove down the Techwood Drive at Turner Studios for NWA taping, just a tiny room with pipe and drape. And my first match was I had 2 matches that day, Rock and Roll Express, and then I had, what's his name? He looked like Elmer Fudd. He had the claw.
Oh, Baron von Raschke?
Yeah, Baron von Raschke.
Elmer Fudd.
And because I'm thinking to myself, here I am, 23 years old, jacked up on steroids. I'm like, and how can I make this look like this guy's going to actually grab my head with the claw and put me out?
Right.
And I was nervous as all get out. There's only like 40 people in the audience, and Tony Schiavone was calling the match, ringside. And but it was fun. And then the Rock and Roll Express, my tag team match, and they took it out. I finished. I made a double drop kick, and from there I was hooked. I was, man, this is awesome. And we drove all the way back to Fayetteville so we could watch that night on TBS.
Right. Now the funny thing is, when you talk about the studio we all grew up with at 605. The studio was the thing, and I just have fond memories of watching guys like Bobby Eaton, like pushing the lights out of the way so he could jump off the top rope and stuff like that. But what a great studio, because you were so up and close,
right,
with the rest. Now, granted, I wasn't in the studio, there, but you could tell.
But
you're
from
like
a fan's
right there.
Perspective, being right there with you, it just made it that much better, right?
It seemed like every fan was a manager.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You're right by the ring. I mean, I personally wrestled in a bar where the ring was about 4 feet away from the bar stool. Now that was the closest I got to the Jim Crockett tapings, for me. But like it must, like you said, it must have been just such a rush to the one to be doing it, and then you realize later, like, oh wow, I can go watch this on television later today and see what I did. Now I would imagine after the Flair, not the coin a pun or anything like that, but like all right, we're on TV now. I would imagine now you would go back and watch and say, all right, well, how did I do that wrong? How did I do this? And you maybe were starting to hone your craft a little bit.
Yeah, that's one thing that Nelson did. We'd still, once we were in the business, we'd still go back and train on the weekends, and he would look at our, he'd tape them, and we'd watch the matches with him. He would tell us what we did right and wrong, and just kind of work with us in that. And then we'd go in the ring if there was something, the mechanics of a move or something, we'd work on that as well.
Right.
It was just really, really cool.
You mentioned Stallion. Now, when you came in there, was he somewhat of a big player in the trainer role back then?
Stallion?
Yeah.
Just for the tryout. He would come work out occasionally. But Nelson always had like Terry Funk and Dory Funk and other. Johnny Weaver would come in and work out with us.
Yeah, the creme de la creme down there. Jeez, like you guys worked out with everybody. Because you never.
Oh yeah,
I say that
even Crockett.
Oh really?
Crockett even had Ric Flair and Lex Luger come work out in the ring with us as they're preparing for the Baltimore Cup.
That's
I don't remember that.
That is so awesome. I couldn't imagine like you come in and Flair is now going to be working out with you today.
Breaking in and it's like, okay, we're going to put you in there with the Nature Boy. Like, who?
What? Who?
What's going on?
Yeah, basically, I was in the ring with Lex, and they were trying to teach him to do a sunset flip from the outside into the ring, and he couldn't figure it out. So I was demonstrating for it on Flair, and I thought, man, this guy pulled up in a brand new Mercedes, and I'm teaching him how to do a sunset flip.
How amazing is that? Oh my God! And you take that, and I met Lex Luger before. He's such a cool guy. He's an amazing dude. Yeah, he's very humble.
Yes.
And I think that happened more now with his health reasons and stuff like that. Because meeting him back in the day, he wasn't as humble, but I think he was still in kayfabe at that point a lot of times. But what's such a great guy. But like it's you got to work with a lot of great talent. And let me ask you this before I even move on. They say enhancement talent, they say jobber. Everybody, and we learned in wrestling that there's a role for everybody to make this show happen. Okay. It's not about you're good, you're bad, you're indifferent. It's a matter of I'm casting this role to make this show. And here's my star, here's my supporting star, so and so forth. So for every guy that goes over, there's got to be a jobber, in any sense of the thing. Let me ask you, is the term jobber offensive or not offensive?
For me, it's not, because I think people just aren't educated on what it actually means.
Right.
The term jobber, people think, oh, you get beat on TV, but this all came about from that time of the business. In '86 was the peak of the NWA. They were printing money, but Dusty Rhodes was the brilliant mind behind all of it. He's the booker and the storyteller, and kids, this is how it's going to be. And but the psychology of the business. Yeah. He's the most mimicked guy in the world. But the whole thing was the psychology. It's like, you boys are here to help tell a story. Mm-hmm. You're helping. If you're going up against Arn Anderson, he's the current U.S. heavyweight champion. Here's the storyline. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to draw the fans in emotionally up and down. You're going to think that you have a chance to beat them, maybe not. And that's the difference to me now versus then, is the psychology of it, and the length of the matches and the storyline that's going on in that match.
Right. Now, as far as that's concerned, when you were learning and going in there, did anybody ever say, well, how do I move up? How do I move past this? Was it like getting in there, were you guys just satisfied with that? Or was it like, hey, you know what? I work out. I look good. When can I be the next star? Was there any kind of like talk like that back then?
Oh gosh, yeah, we were all jockeying, wanting to get a marquee spot on the card. But as the saying goes, when the booker becomes your friend, you get that opportunity. But Dusty would see his vision of who he saw as stars, and it was different. I think I probably wouldn't have never gotten that much of an opportunity in NWA. But when I went to work for McMahon, I remember we were doing television with them, and Lanny Poffo got hurt, and he off tour, and one of the agents pulled me aside. I thought I was in trouble. Hey, you need to talk to your kid. And Gorilla Monsoon, he said, we need somebody to go on the road. Are you available? I'm like, hell yes, I am. And about 3 weeks of shows for Lanny until he was better. But what an opportunity. I was traveling, working boss man, and doing mid-card shows at big venues, and making a whole lot more money.
No, I can imagine.
Absolutely.
Now, I guess because of the fact that you're subcontractors, and because of the fact that it's like, hey, you're booking yourself in a sense. Was there, say probably, like, how difficult was that? I would imagine that there wasn't a lot of downtime during those years, and it's just like a matter of like the only downtime you would have would be when you're unsuccessfully getting yourself booked, I would think.
Yeah, the TV was pretty much, for us, was a weekly thing, and they would always 4 weeks out of the month, and then NWA, they were very intentional about how they did their TV matches because they tied into the house shows during the week.
Sure.
All the storylines and angles, they would tease you during the TV show, and then if you remember the show, they always promote upcoming towns.
Yeah.
You know, coming up in the Raleigh, North Carolina, Dorton Arena, you're going to see Ric Flair try to get back at Dusty Rhodes, and everything they did was tied in those matches. So we had a lot of opportunity to do house matches underneath on the card for second, third matches. So we stayed busy doing that, and but we would just sit there and watch these main event matches and learning and talking to them in the dressing room. And I remember the first time we went in there, all these guys we saw on TV were sitting in the same room with them. I was thinking, this is so unbelievable.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Now, working like you, because you mentioned money wise, obviously you had opportunities with McMahon versus with Crockett in that sense. And I think that with everybody, I'll say the same thing. It's like opportunity happens when you open the door and you happen to, you know, be in the right place at the right time. Was there a preference work wise? Forget about, say, the money or opportunity for a second. Was there a preference work wise between JCP and the World Wrestling Federation?
For me, it was a big difference. Titan Sports, McMahon, WWF. I'm like, this is the big time. And it's funny because McMahon called Nelson Royal. He saw what NWA did with their programming with the enhancement talent, and he lured us away from NWA by offering us more money for television taping. We took the bait and ran. So he pretty much pillaged all the NWA stuff. So, and when they turned to WCW, they started calling us back and saying, well, you know, here's what we want to do, because we went from making just money and being on TV to McMahon. You know, he'd fly us up. You know, we'd have buffet available all day during this, because they'd tape four shows and they put them in the can, so it's an all day thing. So there's always food. You paid us more money. And they flew us. And then WCW's like, well, here's what we're going to do, and they got us back. So we became a chess piece between the two television.
All right. So now that you're basically teetering between both companies, I just wanted to know, how was it gear wise? You know how sometimes guys have an issue with, well, his gear looks fancier than mine and I'm this guy, and how did you go about acquiring your gear now? I mean, then, because now, you know, everybody can run to like High Spots or whatever company and pick up Lucha Gear number 3. You know?
Yeah, right, exactly.
For us, guys, back in the mid '80s, Baby Doll, she was a seamstress, and she made all of our stuff, trunks and stuff. And Nelson knew where to order our boots, but I had specific trunks with a little logo on the back, and that was kind of the, you know, my angle, Tommy Angel.
Right.
And I got my name off of a tattoo on my left bicep. It's Angel of Death. I was a airborne paratrooper. That's how Nelson helped me come up with the name. So I branded a lightning bolt with a halo on it, and when I went to WWF, they looked at it and asked, you know, what's your story? Here's it is. And they're like, that's cool.
That's cool. All right. Next.
We better not upset him too much. You know, he can actually kick our ass.
I'm surprised that they didn't pick up, because obviously you always were a face character in most of the matches that I saw and stuff like that. But I'm surprised that even as enhancement or whatever, that they didn't say, hey, you know, let's go the different route. You were a paratrooper. You were a rough and tough guy. Let's make you something different. Did anybody ever approach you about that and say, hey, let's do a 180 with your gimmick?
Not to the point, because I wasn't a marquee. The reference I made to my trunks was with that McMahon. If you whoever you're working, you couldn't wear the same color trunks as they were matching up with. And I remember one of the guys that traveled with us had trunks similar to kind of Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and he was told he wasn't allowed to wear that on TV. That was Brutus's gimmick, so it was very intentional.
Oh.
But they did talk about, you know, just picking your brain. And I remember when I finally cut the mullet off in the back, and I was doing WCW. It was more of a heel angle where I grew a goatee out, and, you know, former military Tommy Angel, and just kind of changed it a little bit. But because I wasn't a big name on television, there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis or push behind it.
Right, and I get that. Now, I know that, like, I remember back in the day, like, there was a guy, Alan West. Do you remember Alan?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Alan I thought was right around in the same tier as you and Stallion, and it was a great enhancement talent mid-carder. And then he had a very good look about him, and then he went off to the AWA at that time. AWA obviously right around 87.
Right.
88 was in its lighter years at that point. Let's put it that way. So I think they were willing to get anybody they can get that could spark interest in the product and stuff like that. Was there any like buzz or anything like that to say, hey, listen, Tommy, not for nothing, if you want to go to that next level, you might want to move up to up north and go to the Midwest and check out Gagne and see if he could do something with it? Because I know Allen, they started pushing as a babyface upstart, and they weren't having him as enhancement talent anymore. So I took notice of that, saying, hey, I know who this guy is.
Right.
And now he's becoming somebody over here. So was there ever like a buzz for you guys to say, hey, you might want to check that out, and if you want to go to that next level? Or was it just like, once again, right place at the right time?
It was definitely the transition from NWA to WWF, and before we went back to WCW, Nelson Royal actually started Atlantic Coast Wrestling.
Okay.
He had some investors, and he put us all on TV. He pushed us as main eventers, as a regional promotion.
Yeah.
And that's I got a lot of exposure regionally, and I think the both houses, the NWA and WWF, WCW, kind of saw what we really could do in that realm, and opportunities to be the TV champion, tag team champion, stuff like that, and working angles and doing interviews and stuff like that. And that was the hope that ACW wouldn't have folded, but it folded after a year. But to go back to one of the big houses and actually get an opportunity to be pushed.
Right. Because I think something similar happened in more modern days with like Johnny Swinger.
Yeah. Johnny
Swinger was an enhancement talent, not unlike you, where it was a good-looking, put-together guy, could wrestle, and then you fast forward 10 years, and now he was a main eventer on a mid-card level, but he was a main eventer, and I personally think for a lot of guys, two things interrupted anybody's thing. I think one, once we got to the beginning of the Monday Night Wars,
right.
And I think once it got uplifted to every match is a main event, we're not bothering with just showcasing this guy or that guy, because that's really what you guys did very, very well, is that you put over guys and made them look like complete superstars, even guys that couldn't work.
And it's crazy because we know that you're Johnny Angels and you guys are incredible. You guys get in there and you can get in there with anybody and make it look like the best that this person could ever do. We know that. And we applaud you for it, because you were the guys who made other guys superstars.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, and it's the truth. And I think going back to what you said just a few moments ago, to say like a lot of people don't know the engineering of professional wrestling, saying, oh, you guys were just someone that got beat up. You're nobody, you're nothing. You weren't, because you were someone that was taking, and I could take a guy like Barry Horowitz, who could take anybody and make him look like a complete superstar. Guys like, and if you go more modern day, guys like Dolph Ziggler.
Right.
Probably one of the greatest quote unquote jobbers you'll ever get in this business, because the guy looks phenomenal, making you look more phenomenal. You know what I mean? In that sense.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say too is, was there a difference? Walk us through this again, because someone like you, someone like Stallion could put on a very competitive match. And you go back to before, you were saying that they wanted to actually try and give more competition in these matches and all. At that time, there were still squash matches, and they weren't just for the Road Warriors or anything like that. They were for other guys as well. Luger had squash matches. Magnum TA had squash matches for people and stuff like that. Was there a difference in the talent between someone like yourself, who's going to give a more competitive match, and someone who's been booked for squash matches? Because obviously you could see in television, oh well, this guy, he put tights on, but like how is he even in a wrestling ring? He looks like he's completely out of shape. And then someone like you comes in who's like this, all built up.
Dude, every time I seen you come on TV, it was like, oh, he's gonna win.
Yeah. As a kid, you're like,
as a kid, I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah. But was there a difference between the guys that got steadily booked in those squash matches versus guys like yourself that were booked in?
Yeah, there was
actually
Mike Jackson. He was one of the talents in TV back then. He brought a group of his guys up from Alabama.
Right.
And there was that comparison of his guys versus Nelson and Gene's guys.
Okay.
And they were arguing because most of the Road Warrior matches and the Luger matches, we certainly got a share of those, but usually Mike Jackson's boys would get squashed, and we'd have the better matches. And that was basically told in the locker room. Mike was complaining, said, "Look, these guys know how to work. Your guys do not."
Right.
And it was a compliment to Nelson and Gene, because we spent hours and hours and hours every weekend for a couple of years just training and refining, and they were really intentional about us learning and understanding the business, where a lot of schools would teach guys how to do bumps, and that's about it.
And you know what? It also comes down to knowing how to work. There's a reason why, Tommy, you're on the show today. And there's a reason why we know you. There's a reason why we know guys like Rocky King, George South. It wasn't just because they got airtime all the time.
Right.
But these guys made an impression, even if they were losing matches, by how they performed in the ring.
You can see how incredibly talented and skilled they were.
Because and believe what I tell, and you made a good point too, and I'm going to retroact this point, that if you don't know this business, you have no idea what's happening. And when I came into this business and learned how to take bumps and learned how to, lose in a certain way to make this guy go over, it wasn't just a matter of getting like clothesline out of my boots and then just lay there and don't do nothing. There was definitely psychology and storytelling that was happening, even in those types of matches. And guys like yourself, you made an impression. So even if you didn't already know this, I want you to know that you did make a name for yourself to a wrestling fan.
Right.
Because of the fact, because we know who you are. There are plenty of guys out there who got taken out of their boots, you know what I mean, by the Road Warriors and got slammed by Magnum TA and got squashed by Kamala and stuff like that I have no idea who they are. And I couldn't tell you if I even saw them on the street if I knew who they were. But I know who you are. I know who Steve Casey is. Mm-hmm. I know who George South is. I know who Rocky King is, that type of thing. So you guys did make a name for yourself. And once again, it goes back to the beginning of saying everybody has their part in this show. And that was your part. And of the guys that are doing that part, you guys did exceptionally well because you did make a name for yourself and you were popular and you were someone that people were sorting after. So, I mean, once again, applaud to you for doing what you did.
And you
thank you very much.
The show.
You're welcome.
I mean, everybody remembers the stings and all that kind of stuff for what they, for the hype and blah, blah, blah. But you guys, you were the show because everybody talks about Michael Jordan and people like, Jordan. If it wasn't for his supporting cast, Scottie Pippen and them guys, you wouldn't have the great Michael Jordan.
That's true.
And you guys were like phenomenal in the ring.
Yeah.
Just to watch the way you did what you did was incredible.
Yeah.
And I think the highest compliment I was ever paid is when Tully and Arn were brought into the WWF. It was their first match, and we were in the back talking to them, and they're about how excited they were for the opportunity, and they were just worried about who they were going to get on their first match.
Oh, get out.
And so they'd always have a pre-meeting before television. You find out who you're working, if there's a certain angle, and they sat us down and said, look, we know your abilities. We want you to be paired up with Arn and Tully because we know you're going to give them a good match. We want them to have a big pop.
Right.
And I was like, that's so awesome. And then Arn and Tully came right before the match and said, we are so thankful that we have you two guys because we know this is going to go well. So that was a compliment more to Nelson and Gene for what they put into us and our hard work. So that was really cool.
I would imagine that the respect coming down from the guys like Arn and Tully, Flair, Luger, etc., was, you guys were on their level. I would imagine that, like, because once again, talking about carpenters in this business, you guys were able to be like, to make them shine. So I would imagine that the respect level for the most part, I mean, granted, can't say it for everybody because some people are just our assholes in this business, but like, I would imagine that, I would imagine that, there was definitely a level of respect in the locker room for you guys.
Yeah, the expression was if you're a good hand, that was a compliment. That means that you knew you could work and there was no worries. So that was hearing the big name guys like Flair call you a good hand was always awesome.
That's awesome. And coming from guys like Flair, I would think that would mean a lot, especially if you're that close to booking and you're that close to, because obviously that would get you a lot more matches. That's going to get you a lot more TV time, that type of thing.
But speaking of matches,
the night, then we formed better relationship with these guys because we were on the road. We'd always follow them around, ride their coattails, go to the bars and hang out with them or in the gym during the day. But at nighttime, hang out and drinking with them and stuff, getting to know them, really helped us a lot too, just having those relationships.
Right. I would imagine. Sure. And now let's talk about backstage for a second. Did you have a question before I do that?
No, before we get to backstage, I just want to know personally, what was your favorite match and what was your least favorite match?
Probably, I wouldn't say this match as much as the guy that I enjoyed working the most with was Kurt Hennig. He always gave me a lot to do. And then Bobby Heenan would always criticize him. And he's like, you know what? He's a good worker. He needs to shine on TV, but plus it helps make me look good. And Bobby's argument was, well, he's just an enhancement talent. He goes, so what? But he always gave me a lot. So I always enjoyed working with him. And probably the least favorite was Van Vader. He's just a big turd. And he believed his gimmick, and I could absolutely stretch his ass, and I'll just bite my lip. And he'd walk around and talk smack, and he actually intentionally hurt a few guys underneath talent. So he was not liked.
And it's funny because I remember seeing him in the beginning when he was in AWA before he did the Vader gimmick,
right?
And I didn't know what was. Because back then, the big thing was if you were a football player that couldn't play anymore, you became a wrestler. That was like the natural progression. Was to go from like the minor or NFL and go.
That's what Luger did.
yeah, right, exactly. He went from the Canadian Football League, right? Yeah. So I remember seeing him, and let's face it, the Vader gimmick visually was great. I mean, it really was. But I would imagine there are a lot of guys out there who believe their gimmick.
Brother. Egos.
I would imagine,
I can hear it in his voice that he wants to name names.
You're very modest, Tom. Just saying, you're very, very modest.
Dude,
Luger was one of those. He's actually become a very dear friend of mine. But back then, he was still a friend to me. But he really was caught up in his whole gimmick and arrogance and pride. And I think that's what part of his change is now. He's just such a humble man and
a different person. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Funny story. It was during the Nitro days, and we were in Baltimore, I think, and we went down and we were actually staying in the BWI airport,
right?
And we're in that Champ Saloon or whatever that saloon is in there, and it's like wall to wall people because everybody back then, the wrestlers had the carte blanche to go out to the bar. And there wasn't like
back in the 80s were the rock stars.
It wasn't like there was a lot of HR happening. You know what I mean? Like the workers were able to go to the bar and drink or whatever. And we were walking through, and you're waiting for people to move so you can get through tables and all. And we end up being right next to Luger. And my buddy says to him, he goes, "Oh, hi." And he goes, "Oh, hi." Because really, you're like literally elbow to elbow with somebody, right? So he goes, my buddy goes, you look a lot bigger on TV. Right? He says so. And he goes, well, I'm sorry. And he starts flexing like this. I'm sorry to disappoint you. 265, 23-inch arms, blah, blah, blah. And he starts like totally like flexing out. We're like, oh, dude, all right. We just said you looked a little bit bigger on TV. That's all he said because we're making small talk. You know, here. But that's funny. But when I met Luger and he did our first episode, he did our first intro. I met him because I remember I brought to him, he was at a signing, and I brought a T-shirt, which was literally from his heyday when he first got brought into JCB.
Right.
And it was a cartoon shirt that was, I don't even know if it was licensed by Jim Crockett Promotions or whatever, but it had like busting loose and it had like chains and this big cartoon Lex Luger on it. And I said, Lex, I said to Nikita, I loved you as a kid, but I have no merchandise for you. So then I look over to Luger and he starts laughing. Nikita starts laughing. And I look over to Luger and I said, I have something to show you. And I pull out this 35-year-old T-shirt, still clean as a whistle, because I kept it super nice. And he said, oh my God. And he actually said, he goes, let me stand for you. And he got out of his wheelchair and stood up, and like Nikita helped him a little bit, and to shake my hand because he was so happy that I was able to keep something like that for him.
Right.
You know, and he graciously did our intro for the show and stuff. And he was a very nice man.
Extremely nice.
Very, very nice man. But then I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, my God, this was that monster that came into the Horseman. You know, and replaced Ole. Like, Jesus Christ, you know. Now, was there towards the end of JCP, when it was starting to go into WCW, was there any rumblings? Did you guys, was it business as usual? Was there like, hey, we're going to have to tighten up on this, we're going to have to do that, we're going to keep working? Was there any kind of like concern back then of staying on television and staying booked?
Not for guys at my level, but always as a chatter in the locker rooms was that WCW, Turner was acquiring the property, and who's going to be kept as main event, and there's a lot of anxiety on the main event dudes. But for us, we knew we had job security because they wanted to keep that storage stuff for television.
Yeah, which was good, and I think that was, and I would think you would agree to, not just because you worked it, but like, I think there was a much better thing having a Tommy Angel work Luger as Luger's preparing for a match against Flair, let's say, something like that. I think and not seeing the Luger Flair thing happen 35 times before the pay-per-view.
Right.
I think there was, and that goes back to why, Tommy, we're talking on the show today about old school, because you said it to me. Are we going to be talking old school? And I said, damn straight we're talking old school. And we said, oh, good. Because I think there was a scenario where you felt relieved. You felt like you got something once you got that payoff of like a Flair Luger or Magnum TA and Tully, when they're yelling, but nobody's hitting anybody yet. And I could see Magnum do his stuff, and I could see Tully do his stuff. And man, when these two clash, it's going to be great. But it was you guys in between that were allowing us to see this demonstration of their skills. And I think that's a lost art, not for nothing. I really do think it's a lost art, because there's enhancement talent now. But going back to, I think, a step above what they did with you guys, the enhancement talent are now called up and coming. They're now called uprising stars. This kid's great. You better watch him in the next few years, type of thing. They're pushing him, but he's still going to job. He's still jobbing for whoever. But I think I think they potentially have a less likelihood to get television time.
I think nowadays everything's driven on television. They don't do too many house shows, live shows like they did. But the point, I think most people that watched it on television may not know, because they've never been to a house match. But we would have matches that would last 30 to 40 minutes. And brother, you talk about blowing up. To be able to tell a story and keep the audience engaged the whole time telling that story. Yeah. That's the lost art, to be able to draw them in get their emotions up and down. That's the intoxicating part. When you're just physically doing something and people's emotions are changing by what's happening with the story of good versus evil and the outcome. And that's the Dusty always called it the brutal ballet.
Now back then, I mean, especially like you mentioned house shows and too, which are like non-existent nowadays. But I would imagine when you went in there, did they give you a time limit? Did they say roughly 8 minutes, roughly 10 minutes? Okay.
Oh yeah, they'd say before the matches, they would say, "Here's your time, and here's the finish." And whoever you're working with, you'd come up with how you're going to lead into that last few minutes to set up the finish, and how does that correlate with any storylines that are going on, and the managers involved. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it, and then the familiarity of us working with these guys all the time. There wasn't a whole lot of do this, do that. You just get cues in the ring, whether it was the word or just to give you the office by squeezing your arm or something. You just kind of knew what was coming.
That's crazy. Because nowadays you have like 3.13 seconds to get this match done. We're not going to go overtime. You're going to settle it down soon. I think you're right in saying a lost art is an understatement. I showed my nephew one time. It was Barry Windham versus Ric Flair. It was television time remaining. 60 minutes was worldwide. It was the one match was the whole episode. And we were 10 minutes in, and he's like, "Oh my God, when is this going to end?" I said, "Son, you got 50 more minutes of this." I said, this ain't anywhere near this is started, and they're just not, the fans are not prepared for it, that type of thing.
No, the greatest ones to me were Ricky Steamboat, Ric Flair, that would last 60 minutes. Those are just unbelievable. And how they'd come back just gasp. But it was such a great match they always have with each other.
Ricky Steamboat said to me, he said, it just like you just said, he said, it's a lost art. He said, because for me to tell a story with the arm drag and for Rick to tell a story with the leg, he's working my leg. I'm going to do a comeback. I'm going to come back. He's going to kick my leg again. And he's going to put me back down. And then eventually when I start coming back and I start giving him those arm drags and I start putting them in the arm bars, I'm telling my story now and I'm breaking him down because he said there's not one piece of talent out there now that knows to do this anymore. He said there's
then Ricky.
Yeah, Ricky to me was like when I met him, like father knows best. Like Ricky's like the dad of everybody in wrestling. You know what I mean? And I was talking to him. People were coming up to him. "Oh, hi, Mr. Steamboat. Nice to see you. Nice to see you." Like everybody was paying him homage, even if they weren't ready to talk to him. They were just walking by him, and they would stop, make sure they stopped and shook his hand and said, "Hi, Mr. Steamboat," and stuff like that. He commanded such respect and such a humble man, but knew what he was talking about. And when I talked to him, I said, "Listen, I loved," just like you said, I loved your stuff with Ric Flair. Unbelievable storytelling. And he said, "Well, what? You didn't like WrestleMania with Randy Savage for the Intercontinental?" I said, "The marks like that kind of stuff." I said, "I'm a wrestling fan, and this is what I like." And his eyes lit up. And he came out from behind his table, and we sat there and talked for 20 minutes about wrestling Ric Flair. And it was one of the most incredible conversations I had with anybody talking about wrestling because he was just so passionate about it. And, when I hear guys like you, I talk to guys like you and Reno Riggins and everybody just has such a love for this business, Let me ask you this. The theme of our entire season this season, when we started bringing on these talents for interviews, was set by Ricky Santana when he said, "I wanted to say right off the bat, there is life after wrestling."
Okay. Yes, there is.
Yes, there is life.
Not for a lot of them though.
No, I know, right? but what happens with you? Where is Tommy Angel now?
Well, I stepped away in '94. My father was a retired Marine officer. He's always against me going to business. Couldn't understand. I was like, money, fame, and all that. He's like, you'll come to understand the expression 15 minutes of fame, and he committed suicide in '94, and that's when I thought, you know what, the business wasn't in its heyday anymore. I wasn't. Yeah. My hair is falling out. It's like my heart's not in it. I just stepped away, and I went into the radio business. Oh. And I went to work for a very successful morning show, and out of Charlotte, North Carolina. I was in radio for 15 years.
Wow.
And, I was a DJ, and I was also marketing and promotions. I wanted to stay in the entertainment business, but without taking the bumps. So I had a good run there. And
we have a lot more in common than I thought. That's fantastic, man.
And then after my son was born, I went into nonprofit for a couple of years. And in 2008, the economy collapsed, and I found myself out of work. And now I'm in the beer business. I work for 6th largest wholesaler in the country, and selling beer is the easiest thing I've ever done.
I was waiting for you to say that you were in the automobile business, because everybody seems to get into the car business. I mean, everybody. We had Del Wilkes on.
Yep.
And he's working very prominently in cars.
Yep, he's a couple hours from me here in South Carolina.
Yeah, right. Yeah. He was on. I don't know why I forgot that he was on the show for some reason. I don't know why.
I kept mentioning the fact that he was.
And we had a great conversation with him. Then Ricky and Haku both work at the same dealership.
Italian Stallion sells cars too.
That's right. Oh, there you go. What is it about cars and wrestlers? I don't know.
Because we
stand around talking.
We spend so much time on the road. We are the ones to be able to tell you which the best car to have.
Yeah, I can tell you right now. You're going to skip out on that one. You don't want that.
These seats are more comfortable driving from Pennsylvania to Arizona. Trust me.
Now, when you jumped into, and you said you went into radio and stuff like that, was that starting over in a sense? Did you get any notoriety from being Tommy Angel?
None at all, because I remember it was the #1 rock station in Charlotte, and you guys probably don't know them up in Philly, but John Boy and Billy's are they're just titans in the radio business. Morning show, they make 7 figures. But I remember interviewing with the program director once I got out of broadcasting school, starting all over, just working part time. Mm-hmm. And he liked my voice, and he said, "All right, we'll come up for a name." I said, I just happened to have been on television the last 8 years as Tommy Angel. He's like, "That sounds gay. Let's call you Tommy Lee."
That sounds gay. We're going to stop that altogether.
So I just kind of forgotten that most people in the radio for a few years just thought I was just some big guy. They weren't wrestling fans at all. Johnny and Billy did, but and then as the social media came about and everything started surfacing, now you can find stuff online. My son will be 13 next month, and for the longest time, I'd show him pictures and videos. He's like, "That's not you. That's got hair and muscles."
Well, first things first. Happy birthday to your son.
Yes.
Next month,
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Secondly, I do know who you're talking about, because funny enough, my second home is Winston-Salem, North Carolina. That's where my family's at.
Oh, awesome. I got married there. My wife is from there.
Oh, beautiful.
See? Tommy, you're going to be on the show a lot.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm going to have you on the show a lot.
Hey, next time I come down, I'll give you a call and we can hang out a little bit.
It's funny because we have a long beer list of people we have to go drinking with. And it's funny because I mentioned to Haku, I said, "Listen, Ricky, I've been talking to Ricky a lot offline, and I said, we're planning a trip where we're going down to Florida because they're down in Tampa." And I said, and Haku had said this, "Well, now you're all my nephews, so just you call Uncle Haku and we'll go drinking beers and cause some trouble and stuff like that." So
now that we know he's on the way,
you're on the way. We got to stop by.
Oh man, we got to get a party bus now. He's coming. He's in.
You're in for that. I'm telling you, we're gonna get a big. That the Cauliflower Alley puts on their huge reunion, does a lot of great stuff. We're just gonna have to put it together like a beer alley. we really don't produce much. We just are gonna get drunk with everybody.
Sounds like a plan.
Right, there you go. Say Tommy's in. That's good.
No video, please.
When you look back, Tommy, when you look back on the business, and you had a good 8 years, 9 years?
8
years. So when you look back on it, do you look back on it fondly?
I do.
Yeah.
Just the camaraderie, the excitement. I don't have any financial gains from that era, but the funny part is when I talk to people, I don't put it on a resume, and people ask why. So there's no transferable skills from the, I can act like an idiot in front of a whole bunch of people. But just the friendships, I see a lot of these guys at autograph signings, and some of their stories are sad. They know there is no life after wrestling, and they're showing up doing, they're getting paid a couple $100, and some are even still trying to wrestle, and it's sad.
It is. It's when you see somebody. Well, and you look at it in two ways. I think in some cases they can't give up the bug. We know the bug. Once you're bitten by it, it's it.
That itch is always right under the surface, man.
But then there's other people, like you said, that they can't give it up because they don't know anything else. And it's almost like a fear thing of saying, like, listen, this is all I know. And I don't want to venture out. Like you sat there and say, listen, well, I mean, you went into it having skills anyway before you got into wrestling because you were in the military. But like, there are guys that went into it without your skill sets, in a sense. So, and they had to really redo themselves. So, I mean, I think if you didn't go into wrestling, you would have been okay. Obviously, you would have been fine because you came out of the military with extremely great skill sets that help you in the workforce, but these, like you said, there's guys out there, they don't know anything else. And they only can manage themselves. They can't work for somebody else, that type of thing. I would imagine, I mean, granted, you're working for a promoter, but I would imagine when it gets more close-knit, and you're now working at the radio station, as an example, and your boss is like one level above you, I would imagine that was kind of like a transition in a sense.
Yeah, and thankfully with the military upbringing, the military background, understand the chain of command, so to speak, and just understanding your role.
Yeah.
Where in a subcontractor, I do remember when I did get out of the business, the hardest time of my life, because the addiction, like I think you're saying, mentioned, is these guys can't give up the bug. It's the hardest part for me was getting off steroids, knowing that's not healthy for my body, and just going through that transition of not being just unbelievably ripped and strong, and
right.
The popularity of being on TV just kind of fade into obscurity, and that scares a lot of guys. I think a lot of that leads to there's a lot of guys that have died from overdoses. I've been on the road where guys have died in hotel rooms, and they're like, "Hey, where's Brian? Oh, you didn't hear? He's dead." I'm like, "What?" It's just there's a dark part of the business most people don't want to talk about.
It's funny because when I reach out to guys like yourself, and I reached out, and I got this really from like Reno Riggins. Like I reached out to him and he came on the show. But prior to coming on the show, and I said, hey, we do this show, and I remember you, and I would like to have you on the show, and I want to talk to you about your career and stuff like that. And he was like, really? Like, oh my God, this is great. Let's do it. Like he was all about it. And I think it's like when these guys do make this transition, maybe you could mirror this in a sense of saying, like, for someone to come at you and say, hey, I remember you back in the day, dude, let's talk. And it's like, holy shit, really? You do it? It's like, I think it's one of those things where it's like, out of the blue, somebody is remember me for something that I thought was going to be lost forever because it's over. And
it's flattering when people, I look totally different. I'm almost 56. My hair is gone, and I'm not in shape. And someone will walk up and just say, "Hey, you used to be Tommy Angel." I'm like, "You got to be kidding me! How do you know that?" "Oh, I'm a fan," and it just blows me away.
Right. Well, you know what? Like I said, your fans, right, are now older. That's the thing. You know what I mean? Your fans are now older, and because of the WWE buying everything.
Mm-hmm.
You're not seeing those libraries as much anymore. You're not seeing your matches. You're not seeing those old school matches anymore. So I think today's wrestling fan can't appreciate what you guys did. In all honesty, I really think they can't appreciate it at all. I mean, the WWE, I've said it multiple times on the show, they put out a sports entertainment package. They do not put out a pro wrestling package at all. So in almost in a way, it's like you're not watching wrestling, right, in a sense, when you watch WWE now. Hence why this AEW that's coming is being sought after by fans. Hence why, like, I personally watch Major League Wrestling in Florida above anything. I don't even watch WWE at all. I haven't watched it in years because I can't take the storylines. I can't take the sports entertainment. I watch MLW. Hour-long show beats any 3 hours of Raw I've ever seen because it's given me what I had before, which was wrestling. You know what I mean? There's a little bit of sports entertainment in there, obviously, because there's storylines. Mm-hmm. But there's a big difference between storylines and sports entertainment in the sense of saying, like, I don't want to watch a soap opera. I want to watch wrestling, and I want to watch guys that are competitive against each other fight. You know, and that's the thing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I was working for McMahon when he had made that announcement and admitted the business wasn't real. It was sports entertainment. And a lot of the old timers, Nelson and Gene, said, you're witnessing the death of our business, son.
Right.
And the only reason he did that is because when we worked for McMahon, every state that you worked in, you had to pay your athletic commission a fee, a due, whatever it was, $100, $50, whatever. But he paid it for us, and he finally just said, you guys are strong arm me. I don't need to pay all this money.
Oh wow.
So we're not a sport. We're entertainment. So that was the whole reason he positioned it that way, was he didn't want to pay all these states all this hundreds of thousands of dollars every year. So they wouldn't allow us to work in a ring if our dues weren't paid.
Oh wow. There's an exclusive. But no, it's a truth though. It's a truth. And there's always some way around something. And imagine times however many competitors he had to do that for, how much money he saved by doing that.
Yep.
You know,
yep.
I mean, it's there.
But he saw it as a chance to make more money, and the old timers that wanted to protect the business, and they said that this is the end of an era, end of our how we built this business.
Right.
You know what I noticed, and you might, because you worked there, you can probably confirm or deny this, but like I think Vince McMahon, there's a reason why Vince McMahon is this top echelon with a product that wrestling fans do not like. And I think that's because Vince McMahon is not, quote unquote, a wrestling promoter. He is a businessman. And I think he like that alone saved him probably thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars per year just to do that little thing. You know, screw the business. Like you're saying, Nelson Rose said our business is dead. Now that he did that. He didn't give a shit because it's a business.
Well, he considers a visionary. I think he is, but that's what stood apart for us when we went to work for WWF. Is Jim Crockett was just a salty, dry old man. He wouldn't look in the eyes. He'd just walk around, wouldn't say hi to you. And the McMahon, the first time we walked in, he already knew who we were. He walked in, shook our hands. I remember him saying, "Hey, Tommy, welcome. I'm glad to have you." I'm like, that dude knows my name. That was crazy.
Right. That's crazy. But everybody says that when they go over there that it's such a different environment.
He's misunderstood. I mean, he's got his faults and done some goofy stuff, but he really is a great businessman.
That's crazy. And like you said, for them to know who you are, I always respected that. If someone goes out of their way to figure out who I am, and I work for you, I'm not just a number. I always look up to that. You know what I mean?
Give you a little more credit than I would,
than I would somebody else. It's true. Tommy, you were awesome, dude. And
I appreciate being on, and if you have me back, I'll be glad to.
Oh no, I would be glad to
definitely having you back.
I'm gonna have you on like a parlay. I think I'm gonna put like him and Reno and get Ricky and get like a whole bunch of people on one big show, one big ridiculous show. I think that'd be fantastic.
Way cool.
Can we?
He's already got it. Hey,
dude, we should do that on the party bus.
That would be right. It'd be a great show on the party bus to have everybody there. That would be phenomenal. Yeah. Let me tell you something. Once again, I want to applaud you for what you've done. I want to thank you for what you've done because you contributed to what professional wrestling was meant to be. And everybody says, "Oh, well, you're just stuck in the '80s or whatever." For what like wrestling fans like us, but like what? That's when wrestling was wrestling
for us.
And you guys made that happen. So I thank you for what you've done, and I thank you for being as good at it as you were. Can you help me get that cord? I just yanked my cord out of my headphones. but and like I said, if you want to come back on at any given time, I will have you on
we are more than happy to have you on, man.
We have other guys. I have other guys on the show, but they had to work, so unfortunately couldn't be on. But Tommy subscribed to the channel, by the way. Yeah,
fantastic,
Tommy,
man.
you're like one of 2 people that I've had on the show that actually went in and subscribed to the channel. So thank you, I appreciate that.
And if I can offer one thing is, if next time I'm on, I'll give you a better picture to post, because that one is probably the reason why the programmer said my name is gay, because that photo's totally off.
Yeah, give me like a set. I'll have like a bunch of attachments and an email.
Yeah, man.
Here, use this one. No, use this one. This is fantastic.
Hey, we'll talk to you ahead of time. We'll put up whatever picture you want.
Whatever you want.
But yeah, man, I just want to mirror or piggyback on what Dan was saying.
Yeah.
Because you are the reason we became fans. Flat out.
Yes.
I appreciate it. It was a blessing that I was able to be a part of that great business, a small part of it back then.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I think all of us take that in stride to say, I didn't make a big mark in this business. I did make a huge mark in this business, but I was in the business. And that was the goal. Yeah. I think at the end of the day is that we were in the business and we can say we were a part of this train. So if it ever, for some reason, stops, we can sit there and say, well, you know what? I was a part of that. And I contributed to that in any way, shape, or form that it was. You know what I mean? And so once again, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on here.
Dude, we cannot express enough how thankful we are that you came on.
Yes. And like I said, guys, hit that subscribe button down below. Yeah, I think it's right around here. Hit that subscribe button down below. Hit the notification bells. We got plenty of stuff coming up. The next time here on That Way Cool Wrestling Show, we're going to have WCW, ECW, TNA, WWE star Big Vito going to be right here on the show. So you're going to want to check that out as well. That's on July 13th. That's going to be the next time we're up on here. Later today, I will be for Capes Not Included, which is the Grand and Mine show on the network here. I'm going to be over at the 2019 Wizard World, Philly.
Yes.
I'm going to interview a bunch of cosplayers. To creepy people, but I'm going to interview a bunch of them.
How are you going to call them creepy, man?
They don't watch this show. and then we're going to go from there. So once again, for Tommy Angel, for LeGrand Jackson, for myself, Danny J, until next time, we'll see you at the matches. Goodbye, everybody.
The show was produced by DJB Productions. Go to www.thatwaycoolwrestlingshow.com.